Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. My dear students of honors, Part-3, how you folks are doing? Today, I shall begin discussion on John Donne, a metaphysical poet. Additionally, he belongs to the 16th and 17th century poets, and you have 5 poems written by John Donne. They are The Sun Rising, A Valediction, Forbidding Morning, The Canonization, Batter My Heart, and finally, Death Be Not Proud. And today I will talk about the biography and literary works of John Donne, and from the next class I shall start discussing the poems. And my dear students, John Donne is a poet of intellectual ingenuity and theological ingenuousness. He is a contemporary of Marlowe and Shakespeare, and shares with them the spirit and the quality of the Renaissance. The contradictions of the age are reflected in the career and achievement of Donne. And my dear students, John Donne was born in London in 1572 into a strongly Roman Catholic family. His father was a prosperous iron merchant, and his mother was the daughter of a popular dramatist, John Haywood. His father died when he was a small boy, but his mother survived her son, spending some of the later years of her life at the deanery of St. Paul's. We are told by Isaac Walton, first biographer of John Donne, that the boy was educated by a private tutor and then at Oxford, although his Catholicism prevented his taking a degree as it debarred him from public office. The family's devotion cost them more. The poet's uncle, a Jesuit priest, was imprisoned and sentenced to permanent banishment. His younger brother Henry was imprisoned in Newgate for harboring a Catholic priest and died there of jail fever. So John Donne was confronted with the most critical question of his life. He could remain a Catholic with the frustrations inevitable for a gifted young man and with the possibility of a fate similar to his brother's, or he could join the established church and so have open to him all the opportunities which his abilities and ambitions offered. Walton, his first biographer, records something of the cost of his decision to become a member of the Church of England. Long hours of study and thought, a deep need to find truth, and much self-questioning. It was a terrible decision, but once it had been taken, Donne could be employed as secretary to Sir Thomas Egerton, the Lord High Chancellor, with whose son he had become friendly. John Donne took part in 2 expeditions with Earl of Essex, and the 2 expeditions were named as Cadiz expedition and Azores expeditions, held in the year of 1596 and 1597. Donne's future at last seemed secure, but he ruined all hope of promotion by secretly marrying Lady Egerton's niece, Enmore. As far as we can tell, the marriage was a happy one, but Walton, the first biographer of John Donne, records its immediate effects in Donne's own words. Donne said about his marriage, John Donne, undone, undone. He was dismissed by Sir Thomas and imprisoned by Anne's father. Much of his small fortune was spent arranging a partial reconciliation to her family. But his employment had gone, and for some years he had to support himself and his wife and their growing family by small allowances and gifts, and by writing verses in celebration of people of wealth and influence. These were years of poverty and struggle, and very different from the study, playgoing, and visiting of ladies, which had been his preoccupations when he studied law. He now cultivated the great in the hope of a position which did not materialize. His writings about religious controversy, however, especially the anti-Catholic pseudo-matter published 1610, came to the attention of King James I, himself no mean theologian. James decided the poet to become a priest, but to his credit, he first refused, feeling unworthy because of his past life, and no doubt also troubled as he was all his life by the guilt and melancholy resulting from his change of faith. After another great mental and spiritual battle, Donne eventually accepted priesthood in 1615. Whatever his past or his agonies of conscience, there is no doubt of the depth of Donne's faith or the dedication he brought to his new vocation. In spite of ill health and deep desires, at his wife's death in 1617, he became one of England's greatest preachers, and his sermons, especially those delivered at St. Paul's after he became dean in 1621, are part of the great literature of the age. Some, although probably not all, of his religious poetry was written after his priesthood, and it shows clearly that the depressive spirit, which was part of his nature, and the guilt of his change of faith remained to bring him at times close to despair. In 1631, knowing he was dying, he prepared himself physically and mentally. He had written and preached much about death and faced it with composure and faith. My dear students, Donne left a deep and pervasive influence on English poetry. The metaphysical lyricist owed a great depth to him. Sometimes his followers exiled him in happy conceit, passion, and paradoxical reasoning. Yet he gave a sincere and passionate quality to the Elizabethan lyric. He interwove argument with poetry. In spite of its intellectual content, his poems attract us with a sense of vision, an intensity of feeling, and a felicity of expression. He is one of those great poets who have left a mark on the history of English poetry. And now, my dear students, I will cite about the works of John Donne. John Donne wrote two type of write-up. One is before becoming a dean priest, and the other is after becoming a priest. That is, John Donne's secular poetry includes songs and sonnets, the satires, the elegies, verse letters, epithalamions, the progress of the soul, epitaphs and obsequies, and the anniversaries. And his religious poetry includes prose and poems. His religious poetry was written after 1610, and the greatest, the 19 holy sonnets, and the lyrics such as a hymn to God the Father after his wife's death in 1670. And with these few words, my dear students, I would like to conclude my lecture for today. And in my next class, I'll give you an introductory discussion on John Donne, and later I will start reading about the poems and their discussions. And thank you very much for listening.